Good morning and welcome to day 3 of the first Africa Conference on Tobacco Control and Development. For those who've just joined us, my name is Yuveka Rangappa. I'm here in the not so sunny Johannesburg today, and dark for more reasons than one. Lots of load shedding going on here, and I'm sure the rest of you who are in Johannesburg are experiencing the same frustrations, but we're here at day 3. It is so wonderful that we've come to the last stretch of this with so much work going on, and I will be with you till the end of this as your English host. Let's go all the way to London. I'm hoping the sun is out there. Bonjour, Anne-Marie.
Bonjour, bonjour Uveka, ça me fait plaisir de te voir. J'espère que tu vas très bien.
Well, can you believe, Anne-Marie, that we are actually in the final stretch of this historical event, this historical conference, and we still have so much more to talk about. We have more discussions, we have so much more engagement for you on tobacco control on the African continent. Yesterday, we reflected on tobacco control implementation on the continent, and there's lots more. But in case you missed some of that, or you weren't able to pop into some of them, we've prepared a bit of a highlights package and a recap of day 2 of this historic conference. Let's take a look.
Bonjour, chères mesdames et messieurs, et soyez les bienvenus à cette deuxième journée de la toute première conférence africaine entièrement consacrée à la lutte contre le tabagisme et le développement.
Bonjour, my name is Yuveka Rangappa. I am your English host for today and tomorrow, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has made a significant contribution to shaping the tobacco control agenda here in Africa. Well, here's a message from Cynthia Lewis. She is the Deputy Director for Global Advocacy at the foundation. She's been unable to attend, but sent us this message to be read out to you, saying, I think we can all agree that we in the tobacco control community are at a crossroads where it is no longer how are we going to solve the long-standing challenges around tobacco that have been brought to light and exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic, but when. We know what the barriers are, and we have the solutions, including the evidence-based policies needed to protect current and future generations.
The strength of partnership with the tobacco control community are impressive. Partners are joining efforts to build more capacity across the region, learning and exchange tours are organized for experience sharing. As a result, we are seeing more structured interventions happening in the region.
Do not focus too much on the tobacco industry. Let's strategize on other key strengths in our marathon for building tobacco controls.
I think it is very important to understand that mainstreaming tobacco control has been a long journey for Nigeria, but it also has been a long journey for many African countries. What I've gathered from your presentation, Mr. Bode, is that you must use the FCTC to set the agenda.
In Mauritius, we have, there is no tobacco manufacturing. We have actually, the only one that was here in Mauritius was the tobacco BAT has been delocalized in Kenya. We have importers. We do not let the tobacco industry through the importers to interfere in our policies.
We are able to achieve a lot in the tobacco control interventions in the country because we had the necessary structures. We started with the intervention first by establishing the Directorate of Health Promotion and Education, which also housed the National NCD program, and which also housed the tobacco control focal point.
Menthol use is common in Kenya, and 66% of smokers wrongly believe that menthols are less harmful. This is concerning because, as you know, menthol masks the harshness of smoking cigarettes, therefore making it easy for people to begin smoking. 82% of the smokers bought loose cigarettes, even though it is banned. And generally, we can say that cigarettes are highly affordable in Kenya.
On the pattern of use, among the participants that used electronic cigarettes, about 41% of them reported a lifetime use. That's the total number of days they had spent using electronic cigarettes, to be 2 to 10 days. And only very few of them, that's 3.92%, reported using it for more than 50 days. A majority of our respondents in general reported using electronic cigarettes at home.
These relationships remained even in controlled analysis, with those with moderate to high cigarette dependence having more than twice higher odds of reporting food insecurity when compared to non-smokers or those smokers with low dependence on cigarettes.
Le professeur pour cette intervention assez intéressante qui fait finalement un lien entre la sécurité alimentaire et la consommation du tabac et qui fait aussi un lien d'une part entre l'objectif de développement durable numéro 1 et l'objectif de développement durable numéro 2.
Actually, farmers are victims rather than beneficiaries of the sector. There is therefore need for strong domestic tobacco control policies, and reducing cultivation is part of a comprehensive strategy to reduce tobacco use, and this can be achieved by encouraging a crop substitution and diversification.
Some smoke for fun and to kill boredom, as it was a habit. Secondly, thirdly, for socialization, like if they don't smoke, they're not included in a particular group. The fourth one is as a coping mechanism for stress. And the fifth one is proclaiming gender equality.
To the meat of the matter, we noticed that exposure to anti-tobacco messaging was significantly associated with a quit attempt after we adjusted for age, sex, education, alcohol use, and an intention to quit.
Corporations are as powerful as our government make them to be. First is to thank the organizers of this conference, and just say that Africa is rising. Mm-hmm. And we will rise to defeat the tobacco companies. This is a battle for our continent, and we will win. That I am very sure of. Africa will win the tobacco struggle.
Wow. Africa will win the tobacco struggle. L'Afrique va gagner sa guerre contre la lutte contre le tabagisme. Qu'est-ce que c'est fort! Alors, vous l'avez vu, une deuxième journée fantastique, ponctuée de messages très forts. Et vous verrez qu'on vous a réservé une journée tout aussi forte en émotions, chargée en messages importants aujourd'hui. Mais avant de passer à la suite du programme, nous voulons savoir qu'est-ce que vous en avez pensé. Et oui, alors pour ce faire, eh bien, nous avons sélectionné l'un d'entre vous, justement. Il s'appelle Mamadou Barro, il nous vient du très beau Burkina Faso. Et là, j'en profite pour jeter un petit mot pour tous mes amis francophones. Si vous voulez nous suivre en français, eh bien, il vous suffit tout simplement de cliquer sur l'onglet « Interprétation » en bas de vos écrans. Mais tout de suite, allez, direction le Burkina Faso pour rencontrer Monsieur Barro. Hello, Mr. Barro. Welcome. Soyez le bienvenu.
Bonjour, merci beaucoup.
Merci. Alors, we are very, very eager to know what were your highlights of yesterday. Can you tell us about it?
Vous me recevez?
Oui, 5 sur 5. Alors, est-ce que vous préférez parler français ou anglais? Est-ce que vous nous entendez, Monsieur Barro? Ah, je pense...
We're having some connection problems,
yes,
and
he might come back.
He might come back, but I mean, this is to be expected. You know, everything online, that's how things are working at the moment. So we have to expect these technical problems. Let's just try, I suppose, Mohamedou once more. Mohamedou, bonjour from my side, but that's as far as my French goes, or maybe ma chérie, I don't know.
And he's back.
Oh, he's back, okay.
Hello. Mr. Barro, can you hear us? Bonjour. Can you please tell us? Yes, we are so keen to know what were your favorite bits about yesterday.
Et on va parler en français si ça vous dérange pas.
Bien sûr. Uveka, this is time to brush up your French.
I'm going to take notes. Hold on.
Alors, dites-nous tout, Monsieur Barro. Quels ont été vos moments préférés?
I think we're having a big connection problem there with Mohamedou Amari, but hopefully we'll be able to chat to him at some point. I mean, we had we've had some very keen attendees. I mean, Mohamedou also sounds like he's very sprightly as well. I mean, yesterday we spoke to Master Chimbala, who told us he was so naughty that he popped into all the workshops. I can just imagine his face just popping up all over the screen.
A little workshop troublemaker.
A little workshop troublemaker, and he told us, yes, that he was the naughty one in the conference. But I'm assuming that Mohamedou's also had a very good he's got a very good idea. It sounds like he might have attended more than one as well, just to get an idea of them. But I do like the sentiments that are coming out of this. I do like what we're hearing about Africa being the strong continent that we know her to be, and saying that we are on the move, Africa rising. I love those terms that come out of it. And I did manage to pop into some workshops myself this week, and just made some notes and talking about being bold and talking about us just sort of just tightening up on all of these regulations and taking the lead in this for the rest of the world as well.
Absolutely. Finding African solutions for Africa. Absolutely. And it is about, bringing all our synergies together. And I just love the fact that we have attendees from all across the continent and outside as well. So this is really a global topic, and it's fantastic to just see us all coming together to find solutions to make Africa healthier.
Yes, healthier. And like we said over the past couple of days, Anne-Marie, it's a long road. It's not going to be easy because you're dealing with
marathon, isn't it?
So there's some strong arming going on here when you're dealing with this particular industry. There are sort of very, very scary tactics, if we had to even put it that way. I mean, just looking at the impact of the tobacco industry, looking at the interference with governments, looking at threats of legal action, looking at manipulating the public, looking at misrepresenting concerned groups, economic manipulation as well, and also undermining scientific research. And how do you expect the ordinary person on the street to make sense of these things when they're being bombarded with all this stuff to say, this is okay, you won't die from it, it makes so much money, it keeps economies going, but it is killing us, it is killing our children. We had shocking statistics about children, young children, as young, under the age of 13, more and more of them found to be smoking on the continent, and that for me is unacceptable.
Yes, and yesterday there were mentions as well about passive smoking. And talking about the young children, we mentioned yesterday, Africa is the youngest continent. It is the youth continent by excellence. So we need, to go far, Africa needs to look after the health of its children as well.
Yes, absolutely.
It really saddens me to say, but we have lost Mohamedou Barrow.
I was so looking forward to that chat. Okay, but it's fine. It's fine.
So much positive energy.
He can maybe just put his comments on the chat for anybody to read. Possibly, I can suggest that what his highlights were, if anything stood out for him. But I think let's just get on then with the actual agenda for the day. And while we want to know from you, what your experiences were, if you are going to be tweeting, if you are going to be putting things on social media, if you are a Facebooker still after all the controversy we've seen recently, then please don't forget that you can use the hashtag tobacco control. That is the hashtag for this conference. And also let's remind you, those of you who are tech savvy, if you have managed to download the Hoover app, and that's WHOVA, not Hoover like the vacuum cleaner, but WHOVA, and just pop your questions into the Q&A box there on the sessions for the moderators to actually pick up on and deal with those as well for you.
Absolument, nous l'avons dit et répété tout au long de ces 3 jours, cette conférence est aussi votre conférence. Alors participez à la discussion, comme vient de le dire Uveka, au travers du hashtag Tobacco Control en un seul mot et en anglais sur les réseaux sociaux. Allez-y, on aime tellement entendre votre point de vue. Sans plus attendre, en tout cas, je propose Uveka de passer à la session plénière qui porte sur les thèmes de la pertinence sociale et scientifique de la lutte contre le tabagisme, des produits émergents et de l'ingérence dans l'industrie du tabac.
But that's not all. We also have some oral sessions to discuss abstracts submitted to the conference. Like yesterday, we have about 3, I think, in total. Yes, 3 of them.
Et il a donné le coup d'envoi de cette conférence virtuelle historique avec son allocution d'ouverture il y a 2 jours. Il livrera aujourd'hui un appel à l'action pour clôturer cette toute première conférence africaine sur la lutte contre le tabac et le développement. Il s'agit bien entendu du professeur William Bazeyo, président de cette conférence et le doyen de la belle faculté de l'université de Makerere, qui abrite d'ailleurs le Centre pour le contrôle du tabac en Afrique. Et c'est un moment, je vous garantis, à ne pas rater.
All right, well, Anne-Marie, I think it's time now to get into the nitty-gritty, the meat, and that's where we start off with the plenary session as well. So let's call on our lovely moderator for the plenary session. That's going to happen right away. And let's welcome Emma Wanyoni. She's from WHO Afro. And let me just tell you a little bit about this amazing woman. She is a seasoned tobacco control advocate from Kenya. She's worked on research and evidence generation on various aspects of tobacco control, policy, advocacy, targeting relevant government ministries, academia, media, and other civil society actors for effective advocacy and efforts to build build capacity building of tobacco control advocates on the continent as well, and also tobacco industry monitoring and countering as well. She's been involved in African tobacco control, civil society governance and coordination as a former board member of the Kenya Tobacco Control Alliance and the Africa Tobacco Control Alliance. She's currently a consultant with the World Health Organization, and she focuses on novel and emerging nicotine and tobacco products. Emma, thank you so much for your time. Welcome to this historic event, and that is the first ever Africa Conference on Tobacco Control and Development. I'm sure, like Anne-Marie and myself, you are so honored and you feel so privileged to be part of this.
Definitely, Yuveka, and thank you very much for that wonderful introduction. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this plenary session on this third and final day of the first Africa Conference on Tobacco Control and Development. Today, I'm very excited and honored to be your moderator for this important session, where we will have distinguished speakers from across the continent share their knowledge and wisdom on scientific and social relevance of tobacco control, emerging products, and tobacco industry interference. We will hear on the science and economics of tobacco use, youth involvement in tobacco control, the challenge of novel and emerging nicotine and tobacco products, and industry interference, particularly in regulation of these new products. Our first speaker, Dr. Catherine Egbe, will talk about social behavioral constructs of tobacco use. Dr. Egbe is a research psychologist and health promotion specialist with research interests in tobacco control policy and epidemiology of tobacco use and exposure to tobacco, secondhand smoke. She currently works as a specialist scientist in the alcohol, tobacco, and other drug research unit at the South African Medical Research Council, where she leads the tobacco control research, and she's a principal investigator of the first global adult tobacco survey in South Africa. Secondly, we will hear from Dr. Hannah Ross on economics of tobacco control in Africa. Dr. Ross is currently principal research officer at professor level at the research unit on economics of excisable products at the University of Cape Town in South Africa. She also works on issues related to illicit trade in tobacco and alcohol, including measuring the size of tobacco avoidance and evasion and strategies to control the illegal cigarette and alcohol markets. We will then hear from Tonderai Tsara, who has 25 years of marketing, communications, and promotion experience, spanning reproductive health, social marketing, and tobacco control. For 7 years, he has been overseeing Sky Girls, a social marketing tobacco control campaign running in Botswana and Zambia, targeting adolescent girls using social media. Tonderai is co-founder and director of the Dialogue Group, Botswana's largest marketing services firm, and he will speak on youth and tobacco products, a prevention case study. We will also have Dr. Ranti Fayokun, who will speak on emerging products in the context of tobacco control. Dr. Fayokun is a multidisciplinary scientist and a tobacco product regulation expert with extensive expertise and experience building national capacity to facilitate implementation of Articles 9 and 10 of the WHO Framework Convention on Tobacco Control. She has served on diverse networks on product regulation, including the British Standards Institute Committee on Tobacco and Tobacco Products, International Organization for Standardization Technical Committee on Tobacco and Tobacco Products, the WHO Tobacco Laboratory Network, and international organizations such as the World Health Organization. Last but certainly not least, we will have Professor Lekon Ayo Yusuf, who is the Deputy Vice Chancellor for Research and Graduate Studies at Sefako Mahato
Health Sciences University in Pretoria, South Africa. He is also currently the director of the Africa Center for Tobacco Industry Monitoring and Policy Research, the only tobacco industry observatory in Africa. He has over 100 peer-reviewed scientific publications and has co-authored chapters in monographs and books and a number of WHO technical report series as a member of the WHO Tobacco Regulation Scientific Group. Prof will close the session for us by speaking on tobacco industry interference and emerging products and emerging tobacco and nicotine products. So you see we have a rich panel and we look forward to a very engaging discussion. And just a reminder to everyone, there is translation to French, so just check at the bottom of your screens. Also, please use the chat function or the Hoover app to send in your comments and questions, and we'll ask the speakers to address as many of them as we will have time for. I also encourage the speakers to provide direct response in the chat as they come up so that we can cover as many questions as possible. So without any further ado, at this point, I would like to invite our first speaker, Dr. Catherine Egbe. Welcome, Dr. Egbe.
Thank you very much, Emma, and for the introduction. So I'd like to share my screen. Just a minute. I believe you can see my screen now, right?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. I am Dr. Catherine Egbe, as introduced by Emma. So I will be speaking on the social behavioral constructs of tobacco use. I look at the factors responsible for the social behavioral construction of tobacco use, and then go on to talk about cultural values and practices that are associated with tobacco use. I'll also look at gender and youth as they relate with tobacco, as well as the perception of tobacco products and users. Lastly, I would want to engage you about what we should do with the information that I'll be sharing, hoping that I'll stimulate some discussion around that later. So the factors responsible for the social behavioral construction of tobacco use are largely engineered by the tobacco industry's marketing and advertisement. So they use the media to drive home some narratives that tend to end up being regarded as, or being associated with the products. And the media portrays tobacco users as the important segment of the population or the important segment of the people that should be emulated by young people. And so it ends up having that kind of effect that produce what I have described as the hybridized or mediatized culture. So hybridized or mediatized culture is what I have defined as cultural ceremonies or activities that are largely influenced by how the media portrays the use of tobacco products as well as tobacco products themselves. I also look at, I would also like to talk about the influence of peers, because we know that most people who smoke, or about 80% or more of those who smoke, they start smoking as teenagers, and they're mostly influenced by their peers, as well as their significant others and family members. Because when they see their significant others and family members use these products, they tend to see it as a normal thing to do. So the use of these products by family members and significant others tend to normalize these products as something that is not as harmful as one would want them to know that they are. Of course, we have the cultural use of tobacco products as well, which tend to create a certain idea about what these products are. For the cultural values and practices associated with tobacco use, we know that tobacco plants and tobacco products such as snuff and cigarettes have become symbolic in many cultures around the world. Many of our cultures, even in Africa, tend to see these products from a different light as we as public health scientists see them. Some indigenous societies even view these products or even view the use of these products as a means to communicate with ancestors, gods, and spirits. There are some cultural ceremonies that tend to use these products as well. For example, at weddings or burials. I've shown an example of one that is from Nigeria. This is a marriage list where a list is usually provided for the bride to give the bridegroom. And so the bridegroom is supposed to provide these products to the family of the bride. And these products usually include items like tobacco products, like snuff and cigarettes. So the use of these products is what I've described as hybridized culture, sometimes because some of these things are not there or they were not there at the initial stage, but they tend to find their way into the use of this the cultural ceremonies. There's also this tendency to offer gifts to community elders as tobacco money or snuff money. This is not necessarily money that should be used for these products, but it is symbolically given to elders, by younger ones to say, okay, I'm giving you this money to buy snuff or to buy cigarettes, but that is just a way that the products are being constructed in the society as well. There is also the use of traditional of these products as traditional medicines. We've heard of through my studies that I've conducted that some of these products are believed to have medicinal properties, and I'm sure that they do have, but the construction of these products is what I'm trying to address today. So, for example, we heard that snuff is used to cure cold, convulsions, and to even induce pregnant women during labor. There is the issue of planting or cultivating the tobacco plant around houses to ward off dangerous reptiles around the home. I don't know how effective this is, but at least that is what I was told during my study. For women, we know that generally women use tobacco products far less than men. But we know also that the sociocultural meaning of women smoking is changing. The landscape of women smoking is changing gradually, especially in Africa, where it's usually very, very low in terms of the prevalence. And the change in sociocultural meaning of tobacco use among women is tending to increase the prevalence of tobacco use among women. And because these cultural barriers which creates the social pressure to prevent women from smoking is being removed or is reducing, we also see that there's a greater or higher uptake of smoking by women. In some societies, what we have found is that in some societies, it is more tolerable for women to use smokeless tobacco products than to use combustible tobacco products. Also, we've heard of smoking being used as a means to control one's weight. And we know for women, the issue of weight loss is a big thing for us. And I believe that the tobacco industry knows this as well and has used it to drive home a narrative that makes more women see smoking as a means to control their weight. Industry efforts to associate these products with fashion industry has also been seen in their sponsorship of fashion shows, as well as advertisements that use slimmer women and more elegant women to drive home their point. You can see the advertisement on my right, which or it should be on your right as well, which said to keep a slender figure, no one can deny. So the woman should use Lucky Strike. And that is also one of the problems we're having with the construction of these products. The advertisement associating smoking with gender equality and women emancipation also markets these products to females. So female smokers sometimes see smoking as a means to assert themselves in a male-dominated world and a means to show that they are independent. But we also know that more and more urbanized women are more likely to use cigarettes than those who are living in rural areas, because as people move from the rural areas to the urban areas to get jobs and get better opportunities, one of the things that they are exposed to is more women smoking because of the less strict cultural pressures around the use of these products. But I must mention too that in some social settings, irrespective of the fact that more women are beginning to take up smoking, smoking by women is still very much frowned upon. And Nigeria and Ethiopia are examples that I can give, and I'm sure that more people can give us examples in the comment section about how women smoking is viewed in their societies. Women, in terms of men, it's a little bit different, because for the men, the smoking of cigarettes and the use of tobacco products is seen as something that is a social status symbol. You know, something that is for the accomplished or professional, the successful male, the one that is upward mobile, the one with strength and grit, and the one that is adventurous. But I must mention that cultural norm seems to contribute to the association of the male identity with tobacco use. For example, the marriage list I showed earlier, it's the products that are there are supposed to be provided to the male in the family of the woman. So it's not for the females in the woman's family, but the males. So that creates an impression that it's okay for men to use these products, and it's not okay for women to use these products. So African cultures tend to make it look as if also that women can use smokeless tobacco. Like even the puffing of cigarette is seen as if it's a sign of deviancy. And so when you see women taking it up, it's kind of creating that impression that we can break that cultural barrier. For young people and tobacco use, the influence of the advertising, promotion, and marketing efforts of tobacco industry is greater. I must mention that we're going to talk more about that later. So the young people see the use of tobacco products as an identity for the successful, the people who are getting to that point where they can say, I've made it, or it's a sign of adulthood or independence, or a sign of toughness. And in many cases also, it's a means of achieving acceptance among their peers. I've not delved into the marketing of novel tobacco products, but I must mention that the introduction and marketing of novel tobacco products are focused on driving home these points that I've just mentioned, and that creates that as a pull factor for the young people to initiate the use of these products. For the perception of tobacco products and their users, we see both negative and positive perceptions. So for the positive ones, these ones are largely driven by the advertisement and marketing of the tobacco industry and by the media as well. The negative perceptions, they are usually influenced by public health messaging and their cultural and religious perceptions about the use of these products. So smokers.
Sorry to interrupt. Please, you have 1 minute, so please
Okay.
may want to wrap up.
So this is the last slide. So what do you think we can do with this information that I've shared? The first thing I would say is that we must preempt, monitor, and expose industry activities targeting specific subgroups that I've mentioned. We must sensitize media practitioners, especially owners of media industries. I believe that most of the journalists just do what their employers tell them to do. So we should target the owners of these media companies. We must also design targeted prevention interventions as well as tobacco use cessation interventions. I believe strongly in the championing of the smoke-free movie campaign because of the impact of the influence of the media on the use of these products. And lastly, I would say, just like we do with sex education, we should try as much as possible to start driving home the point to kids at an early age about the harms of tobacco use, as well as preparing them to withstand the pressure from their looking at how we can deconstruct the use of these products as well as the products themselves. And by doing that, we will hope to be able to create a tobacco-free community and a tobacco-free country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Egbe. It's very unfortunate that we do not have a lot of time because there's quite a lot of interesting perspectives that you're bringing in your presentation, especially when you look at the cultural values. And it's amazing how, as Africans, our cultures are basically more or less the same. It's like we are one. And I can already see some common issues between the cultures that you have shared and what we have here in Kenya as well. So thank you very much for that presentation. And I would like to invite the second speaker, Dr. Hannah Ross. Please take the floor.
Okay, hello, greetings from Cape Town. I will start to share my screen if I can. Okay, maybe now. So let me go to presentation mode. Okay. Emma, can you see correctly what I'm too far ahead. Yeah, can you see my slide?
Yes, I can see
Okay,
clearly.
great, excellent.
Thank you.
So greetings everybody. My name is Hannah Ross and I'll be talking about economics of tobacco control in Africa. So Catherine was a wonderful introduction to my talk because Catherine talked about micro level perspective about how tobacco is perceived in a community and how this kind of a perception can drive consumption. I will be talking about macro level impact of tobacco use in Africa. So let me start with the size of the market. Size of the market in Africa is relatively small, and that's why I named this first slide, Tobacco Last Frontier, Africa. That means that this is the place where the industry see an opportunity for expansion. They already have a shrinking number of smokers in the North America, in Europe, in many Asian countries. Africa is still a land of opportunities for them. Why is that? It is because, as I said, relatively low smoking prevalence, there is economic growth, rapid urbanization, as Catherine mentioned it, as people move from rural to urban area, they start to, they may be more vulnerable to initiating smoking. But we also have issues with weak tobacco control. We have relatively cheap and affordable cigarettes as a result of the weak tobacco control. And in some countries, countries even welcome tobacco companies as an investment to their economy. WHO predicts that if we won't act, the number of tobacco attributable deaths is going to double in Africa by 2030. So some time ago, I, with my colleagues, did a simulation about what would be the number of smokers in Africa going forward. And here you can see the rapid growth that is in the blue section of this graph. That is the growth of number of smokers in Africa with no policies interventions. If there are good policy interventions, we can slow down this growth. And that's the red part or the red part of the graph. So there is really an opportunity for policies to save a lot of lives on African continent. How do we motivate policymakers to make to implement and enforce these policies? One of the way we economists do it is that we present or calculate the cost of smoking. I have done a study recently with my colleague here, Michael Bochi, and where we calculated the cost of smoking in Africa, in South Africa. And we found that the cost of range between 1 to 3% of GDP in South Africa, about $2.9 billion every single year. So these costs are both in the healthcare sector, but also on the productivity side. In healthcare sector, this is particularly important during this pandemic because smoking attributable diseases are stressing the healthcare system that is already stressed because of COVID. Then on the productivity side, Africa cannot afford to have lower productivity, low labor productivity. It needs to grow, it needs to develop, and that can be done only through higher labor productivity that smoking is actually suppressing. So this is how we sort of try to convince policymakers to act on implementing tobacco control measures. In terms of what kind of policies we need to implement. So when we look at this graph, it shows the type of policies that are needed in Africa most. On the right-hand side of the graph, you see Asia, and on the left-hand side, you see Africa. And the lighter color means that the type of policies that prevent death is intervention. That's the lighter color, and the darker color is prevention. It's very clear from this graph that Africa needs to focus on prevention. We also need to focus on interventions, but interventions that have an implication for prevention. So what are these policies? These policies are primarily tobacco tax policies. I know there are other tobacco control policies that are very, very important, like pictorial warning labels and others, and the ban smoking in public places. But from an economic perspective, we really see tobacco taxation as the most effective and the most cost-effective measure to reduce tobacco use in Africa and improve public health at the same time. Tobacco taxes are especially important for prevention because we know from our studies that youth respond to higher prices and higher taxes than the rest of the population. And therefore, these higher taxes really do prevent young people from initiating smoking. We also know that, as Catherine explained, that there's this peer effect. If there are higher taxes and higher prices, the adults smoke less, and therefore, through the peer effect, this affects also youth smoking uptake. However, Africa lags behind this particular policy. It does not have a good achievement when it comes to tobacco tax policies. As a result, cigarettes are usually affordable. Affordability is increasing. And you can see on this map that the brown is the color that we don't want to have, because that's where the share of tax in price is relatively low. And we see that there's a lot of brown countries in sub-Saharan Africa. Only 2 countries, in fact, in sub-Saharan Africa were able to meet the gold standard as described by WHO, where the excise tax represents at least 70% of retail price, and these 2 countries are Mauritius and Madagascar. The rest of the Africa does not comply with the best practice. It's not only the tax rate, but it's primarily the tax structure that is problematic in Africa. I'm sure my colleague Corne van Walbeek have already talked to you about this, but I just want to quickly reiterate that if Africa doesn't change its tax structure, most of the countries have ad valorem tax structure. This is not going to help with the tax policies, cannot help with prevention. We first need to set up a good tax structure that we can build on so that the next policies can focus on tax level. So first we need to really build the good foundation, and that's the tax structure. Because the best tax structure that we know that works pretty well is to have a specific tax or a mixed tax structure where we combine together ad valorem and specific tax. That kind of tax structure will also help with enforcement and will help countries to generate more tax revenue. So, even if countries have ad valorem tax systems and they increase taxes over time, that may not even impact prices or impacts prices very to a small degree. And therefore, that will not help us with reduction on tobacco use in sub-Saharan Africa. Talking about taxes, we need to talk about illicit trade. And the reason why we need to talk about it is not because higher taxes drive illicit trade. We already know that that's not true from our empirical studies. We need to talk about it because industry is using illicit trade as a weapon to defeat or to reduce the impact of tax policies, or reduce the legislation or weaken the legislation that is trying to increase taxes. So therefore, that's why we do need to talk about illicit trade. Yet, despite the fact that industry is very much overestimating the size of illicit trade, we're also in many cases implicated in fueling illicit trade in Africa. So as I mentioned, our studies often show that the size of a tax or the increase of tax is not related to illicit trade. When we look at the data that the industry itself shows about illicit market in cigarettes in Africa, we see that actually even industry doesn't believe that there is a problem with illicit trade in Africa and Middle East. This is a graph or data from Euromonitor. They put together Africa and Middle East, so I couldn't disintegrate. But here we see how they portrayed the size of illicit trade in Africa and Middle East. And what we can see that it's currently, we're about in the territory of 8.3 to 8.6%. Not a big deal because the global average is close to 12, 11%. So Africa is and the Middle East is below the global average. So one would say not a big deal. But what is always important, interesting about these graphs, they always aim higher. We see where we are now in the green line, we're going higher. But I guarantee you, if we would have seen this graph in 2012, we wouldn't go down with this graph. The production wouldn't be going down. The predictions would be going up. And that's the trick that Euromonitor and the industry is using, always predicting that illicit trade is going to increase, and it's because of tobacco taxes. Do we have problem with illicit cigarette market in Africa? Yes, we do. But
Dr.
as I said,
Hannah, if you can begin to wrap up, please. You have
yes,
1 minute.
I'm wrapping up. So our problem in the illicit market in Africa is mostly related to border security. This study from Ethiopia shows that in most of the country, there's almost no illicit cigarette market. The estimates where we have the whiteboard was about 1 to 3%. On the border with Djibouti and Somalia, 87, 98%. Very clearly not related to taxes, related to border security. And we see the same thing in other African countries as well. So this is my last slide. What I want to say that we know that there is illicit trade, but we also know that we can increase taxes despite the presence of some illicit markets. And this increase in taxes is going to bring public health gain and bring additional revenue. What is important to do as we're increasing the taxes is to improve tax administration and improve enforcement, because if we have those two together, if we have good tax administration and good enforcement, the illicit market is not going to be a problem at all. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ross, for that insightful presentation. Again, time limitations, so please let's continue the discussion on chat. I can already see some good feedback for Dr. Ross and Dr. Egbe on the chat section. So please, if the speakers can go ahead and respond to some of those specific questions on the chat, so that in case we don't have time to come back to them, then we can address as many questions as possible. Now I want to invite our third speaker. Our third speaker is going to be Tonderai Tsara, who will speak on youth and tobacco products, a prevention case study. Welcome, Tonderai.
Hello, and thank you for having me. I'm going to quickly share my screen. I trust you can see it.
Yes, we can see it, Tonderai. Go ahead.
Okay, great. So Dr. Egbe spoke about, the cultural nuances, and Dr. Hannah talked about sort of like, Dr. Egbe talked at a micro level, and Dr. Hannah spoke at a macro level about interventions. And I'm going to talk very briefly, about youth and tobacco products and a prevention case study, which is the second pillar of the two type of interventions that Dr. Hannah spoke to. African women are being targeted by the tobacco industry because they have traditionally low rates of smoking, and so they are seen as a growth market. Adolescent girls are most vulnerable because tobacco use is primarily established in adolescence. Female youth are now smoking at a higher rate than female adults in 30 African countries. In Botswana, where I live, 8.8% of adult women use tobacco, but 16.2% of 13 to 15-year-old females use tobacco. This shows what is a huge potential problem. And this is that a generation of youth are being targeted, being initiated onto tobacco, and will become lifelong users if nothing is done about it. One of the ways we know that the tobacco industry targets people, especially youth, and especially young women, is through branding. I've been talking about tobacco in marketing terms. That's the way big tobacco thinks. I'm actually the MD of an advertising firm called the Dialogue Group in Botswana, and advertising is an industry that has historically often collaborated with big tobacco to target young people by positioning and branding smoking as cool and aspirational through music and the movies, music videos, etc. My companies and other like it are now using those same tactics for good. We are rebranding non-smoking as the cool and aspirational choice for young people to try and counter the underhand tactics of the tobacco industry. The Dialogue Group is one of the implementing partners of the Sky Girls program, which targets the vulnerable group of adolescent female Africans and uses social marketing and advertising techniques to encourage them to stay away from tobacco. I have a short 3-minute case study video, which we'll play now.
Sky Girls is a social marketing program that builds confidence and resilience in teenage girls to help them say no to smoking. Sky recognizes that most girls already know the health risks of smoking, but feel social pressure to try it anyway. Powered by our theory of change, the Sky Girls brand empowers communities of teenage girls to confidently express their own choices. Impactful and inspiring messaging strips the aspiration out of smoking by presenting staying tobacco-free as the cool choice. Launched in Botswana in 2014 and Ghana in 2017, our multi-channel campaign has reached hundreds of thousands of girls through events, digital, print, TV, radio, and social media.
Sky has played a big role in my life. It has helped me find a better me, and it has also helped my friends a lot to know who they are and what they stand for.
Sky has helped me to say no to smoking because I've read from the Sky magazine about a lot of tips of how to say no. And yeah, I always say no to smoking when my friends request, and I say no, not just being rude. I say it kindly and confidently, and it really helps because right now I can deal with peer pressure thanks to Sky.
Here in Ghana, and people kept talking about how shisha is yawa, and they said shisha is actually tobacco. So now definitely I don't want to do shisha, and I don't want to be yawa, and I've always wanted to be a cool kid, so yes, I'm not going to do anything that will prevent me from being a cool kid.
Being a Sky Girl is very important because through this cause they provide us with confidence so that we can stand for ourselves, to fight for ourselves through the good times and bad times.
Without Sky, I think I would have started smoking because most of my friends do smoke, so it was good. If I wasn't true to myself, like who I taught to Sky, I would have fell for it easily because most of my friends do it.
Dama, naga alay into the dama because the join Sky, I wouldn't make it a job. Masana, we are mutani suka taru. We are yawon su yake masana ta saya. Ta yi magana na da abin da ke damunta, da abin da ta gani. Kaman wai Sky so su ce kamar Sky ambassador. Na ce a Sky ambassador ya ni da kana zama Sky mada. Ni da kai na karbe ku fine. Isa ni ma na zama Sky mada.
Research into Sky shows it has shifted norms and attitudes and changed the lives of thousands of girls. Girls who are exposed to Sky are less likely to say smoking is attractive, they feel less pressure to smoke, and they are less likely to smoke in the future. And Sky empowers girls in other ways too. They feel better able to make their own choices, They feel more supported by others and say Sky helps them think about their futures. And we know that the more often girls see Sky messaging, the more impact it has. Sky Girls is a proven model that changes attitudes and behavior around tobacco and builds confidence amongst teenage girls.
So since the making of that video, Sky has rolled out to another 3 countries. This is now being implemented in Botswana, in Ghana, in Zambia, Kenya, and Cote d'Ivoire. And 6.2 million girls have been reached by Sky so far. Also, since making this video, we have collected more data on the program and its impact. There are a lot of statistics that we are proud of, but in particular, the fact that since Sky was launched in Botswana, we have been able to see a decline of tobacco use amongst the target audience in Botswana of 18%. And this program was assessed by the World Health Organization standards as very cost effective. Turning briefly to new and emerging tobacco products. This is an area that is especially important to look at when programming for young people, because new products are often marketed at the youth, and the industry often markets them by positioning them as cool and appropriate for young people to consume. Just to share some of the results that we've seen from our research in Botswana and Zambia, and just as a note, we refer to shisha as a new and emerging product because there's no historical shisha culture in these countries, and it's used primarily targeting to young people at parties, social events, clubs, nightclubs, etc. So in Botswana, by age 15, 50% of girls who know what shisha is have tried it. This is significantly higher than the number of girls who have tried a cigarette. 14.6% of girls know that shisha contains tobacco. And then the main reasons a girl would report smoking shisha are to look cool in front of her friends, peer pressure, and because it's trendy. In Zambia, 7% of teenage girls have smoked shisha, which is similar to those who have tried a cigarette at 7.75%, and 2.5% have tried an e-cigarette. We don't have historical data for this, but we believe the use is increasing rapidly in Zambia. As I wrap up, from a branding perspective, when you look at the stores selling vapes, they use phrases that are clearly aiming to attract young people, like affordable, fruity, refreshing, vibrant, and images of young people vaping. Hence why it is so important to tackle these emerging products using the same strategies of branding, marketing, and promotion to position these products as dangerous and undesirable. Again, we don't have time to get into all the stats today, but we would be happy to share this data with you. So do get in contact with us on the details on this last slide. Thank you very much for your time and attention.
Thank you very much, Tonderai. There's a lot of positive feedback coming from the chat section from the audience. Very many people are enjoying the work that you're doing and the video that you have shown. And I think all of us agree that that in Africa, there's a big onslaught of attack by the industry targeted at young women and females generally. And a campaign like Sky is very critical in terms of empowering women and especially our young girls to be able to say no to tobacco. And we hope that such a campaign can be rolled out to other countries in the continent. So thank you very much for your presentation. So we now want to move to the next presenter, who's going to be Dr. Ranti Fayokun. Dr. Ranti is not able to join us live in this session, but she has sent us a recorded message that we're going to play now. And in the message, she'll be speaking on emerging products, and I think she will build up to the presentations that have already been shared. She'll be speaking on emerging products in the context of tobacco control. Thank you.
Good morning. I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me to contribute to this important session. My name is Ranti Fayokun, and my presentation is on emerging products in the context of tobacco control. I will start with the Global Treaty on Tobacco Control, touch very briefly on Empower, the challenges associated with regulating novel products, as well as the regulatory status of novel and emerging products globally and in Africa, and I will end with some closing thoughts. The starting point for me, given the title of my presentation, is the WHO-FCTC, an evidence-based treaty negotiated under the auspices of WHO to combat the tobacco epidemic. Currently, there are 182 parties to this treaty, and it established tobacco control as a priority for public health. In 2007, Empower was launched. This supports implementation of 6 tobacco demand reduction measures, which are in line with the WHO-FCTC and are considered the most cost-effective and impactful of the demand reduction measures. Tobacco, as you know, is responsible for 8 million deaths globally every year. And current tobacco users are at risk of the same fate, since tobacco kills half of its users. As you will hear from later in a bit, the tobacco industry has a history of opposing tobacco control and works systematically to undermine tobacco control policies. But despite the tobacco industry efforts to prevent policy progress, countries are steadily making progress in adopting tobacco demand reduction measures. In recent years, newer products with diverse characteristics have been introduced to many markets, many of which appeal to the younger generation. These products, such as nicotine pouches, electronic cigarettes, and heated tobacco products, some of which are shown on this slide, present challenges for regulation. And unfortunately, regulation has not kept pace with product development. Going back to the WHO-FCTC, Article 2 and Article 52B allow countries to take measures to control these products. Article 2 allows implementation of measures beyond those required by the Convention, and Article 52B allows parties to adopt and implement legislation as appropriate to develop policies for preventing and reducing tobacco consumption, nicotine addiction, and exposure to tobacco smoke. Here I've tried to summarize what is known so far about e-cigarettes, which some refer to as electronic nicotine delivery systems or electronic non-nicotine delivery systems. For example, these products are attractive, including to young people. They contain nicotine, which is addictive. They expose users to harmful chemicals, and many people who use them with other tobacco products or nicotine products, something known as dual or polyuse. Although the long-term effects of these products are unknown, enough is known for countries to take action to address these products. For heated tobacco products, these are tobacco products and should be treated as such. As you can see, ENDS and HTPs make up only a fraction of the global tobacco market, but manufacturers tend to pitch the newer products as good for public health. However, it is important to note that the core product is still cigarette, with cigarettes making up more than 90% of their global market share. So cigarettes are still being aggressively pushed, but at the same time, the tobacco industry lobbies governments to pave the way for newer products while undermining proven tobacco control interventions. There are many challenges faced by countries which I've classified under 3 broad categories. For example, the industry intimidates public health experts and interferes with tobacco control, and regulations are not resilient enough, and there is lack of or inadequate capacity to regulate these products. Also, in many countries across Africa, there are inadequate mechanisms, for example, to enforce the laws on these products where measures exist to regulate them. The last WHO report on the global tobacco epidemic addressed emerging products. It addressed the evidence on ENDS, their regulation, and the role of emerging products in tobacco industry interference. It showed that 79 countries allow the sale of ENDS, but have one or more measures in place, fully or partially, including age restrictions on the sale of these products. In addition to this, 32 countries ban the sale of ends, but unfortunately 84 countries have no regulations whatsoever in place for addressing these products. This slide, as well as the next two slides, show the measures in place globally for tobacco as of 31 December 2021. This shows that using Empower, even though some progress has been made in Africa, there's still quite some way to go to achieve best practice level. This slide shows some more countries, and you can see where more progress is needed. For example, W, mass media campaigns, and P. Here are the rest of the countries and how they're doing in terms of tobacco control. This table shows the regulatory status of NC and NDS and HTPs in Africa based on laws adopted as of December 31, 2020. Of the 47 parties in Africa, only 10 have measures for these products as shown. And while some countries have banned these products and others regulate these products, close to 80% of countries in Africa have no measures whatsoever in place to regulate these products. So looking ahead, novel products should be considered in the context of wider tobacco control, which means that a country must consider its regulatory framework and capacity. Countries are urged to focus on proven interventions in line with the WHO FCTC, as well as their policy goals. They should protect existing tobacco control policies, draw from the experiences of other countries, use available resources, including from the Conference of the Parties to the WHO FCTC, WHO, and other tobacco control partners in Africa to protect the next generation from a lifetime of addiction. I have 3 key messages in closing. Tobacco control interventions are working. However, more needs to be done to implement and enforce proven interventions, such as comprehensive application of the WHO FCTC. Where these products are not banned, they should be strictly regulated to protect the health of the next generation. And countries should consider implementing policy options articulated in the Conference of the Parties and WHO documents, such as preventing initiation of these products, minimizing the health risk associated with them, preventing unproven health claims from being made on these products, and protecting tobacco control from commercial and other vested interests, including those of the tobacco industry. Thank you for your attention.
So we want to thank Dr. Ranti in absentia for that insightful presentation. During the Q&A section, we have Dr. Vinayak Prasad, who's going to sit in for Dr. Ranti so that he can be able to respond to any of the questions that may be raised from that presentation. Dr. Prasad leads the WHO TFI program and is responsible for the overall coordination of tobacco control program at the WHO HQ headquarters. And again, I continue to encourage the speakers to respond to the feedback that is coming in from the chat. I'm informed that Dr. Prasad is leaving shortly. So may I just, before I go to the final speaker, just ask him to maybe say 1 or 2 things to augment the presentation that we've already seen from Dr. Ranti. If the organizers can allow me to do that, just a few minutes, Dr. Prasad, and then we can go to the final speaker.
Thank you, Emma, and sorry I need to step back out for another urgent meeting, and this is stretching over time. So reiterating that there are less than 10 countries that have regulated age restrictions for sale of these emerging products. And I think that's an important message which comes from Ranti's presentation. If you want to protect the youth and go for a tobacco-free Africa, we really need to tighten the screws on that. These products are known to attract youth, and they are 2 to 3 times more likely to become conventional cigarette smokers. And therefore, how you ban it, especially banning it for children, is something which, as a regulatory measure, must be seriously considered for countries in Africa. And my final word is that there are 25 countries on track to achieving a 30% voluntary global target to reduce tobacco use in Africa. And we shouldn't forget. So the narrative is things are working, Empower and FCTC measures are working. We really need to accelerate the pedal and get the remaining to also start seeing the gains. And we don't have to worry about these novel products, because this needs to be treated exactly the same way as other products are being treated. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Prasad, for that input. And I'm sure that we can continue to engage even after this conference, and participants can be able to get contacts of all the speakers and can be able to get follow up for specific questions that they may have on that session. So thank you for joining us. So I want to go to the final speaker of this session, and the final speaker is Professor Lekon. And Professor will be talking about tobacco industry, especially around tobacco industry interference on emerging tobacco and nicotine products. So welcome, and take the floor, Prof.
Thank you very much, Emma, and it's a privilege to be in this session of mainly women, and to have, perhaps that is why you forced Dr. Prasad into the program. And I'll just go straight to the presentation so that we can have questions. I'll be speaking on tobacco industry interference and emerging tobacco products and nicotine products. And most of the data comes from South Africa, but I'm sure that a lot of lessons to be learned, to the extent that the industry sees the success in South Africa as a way to penetrate the African market. So I'm going straight to what interference is in terms of what the industry, how the industry sees it. This quote from the former Vice President of Philip Morris says it all. And I will highlight those in underlined, those phrases underlined. It is to shape regulatory environments, fight aggressively with all available resources, any attempt to diminish their ability to manufacture their products efficiently and to market them effectively. So Philip Morris leaked documents by Reuters also shows what the global plans were. And in particular, I just wanted to emphasize that it is clear from those documents that the marketing of the so-called reduced risk products, or the RRPs, such as IQOS or e-cigarettes, are part of their strategy to normalize the tobacco industry. So they say this is part of their continued efforts to support the normalization. Further, you can see from the same document, in addition to their views on the CSOs moving away from the health arguments to other areas, they see this as a benefit to the industry because they feel the CSOs are weaker in these other areas. And they also see that they have a good story to tell when it comes to e-cigarettes and these other. Importantly, they see the vaping associations that usually are organized e-cigarette users as allies because they say they are more willing to fight back than smokers. So in your countries, when you find a harm reduction alliance or vaping associations, they're actually front groups for the tobacco industry most of the time, and I'll show you why. Furthermore, the industry also sees the debates around the emerging products as causing division amongst tobacco control community. And also is distracting us from actually implementing FCTC compliance laws. These are some of the products you find in South Africa and Kenya. The lift was registered, for example, by Pharmacy and Poison Board in Kenya during 2020 without the knowledge of the Ministry of Health, apparently without the knowledge of the Ministry of Health because of the gap in regulation. It is also creatively marketed, presumably in sachets, to make purchase easier for low-income earners and, of course, possibly youth and young people. You also see the novel products Vus brand with a very highly addictive nicotine salt formulation that was launched in South Africa in 2020. And you see the fruit flavors are usually very common flavors that they usually push. What is common among these emerging products is they're similar to the strategies they have used for cigarettes. So they're basically undoing a lot of the work that we've done. So similar to the strategy for marketing cigarettes, a common strategy for marketing this product is to use celebrities' endorsement and use the social media platforms, targeting youth in particular. The scenes you see here are from the Vus-inspired streaming, live streaming on the occasion of the launch of the Vus e-cigarette in South Africa. We then looked at Nielsen data, sales data. Within 3 months of the launch of that Vus and all of that concert, Vus made a significant market penetration, reaching the levels that the top brand was over years. And you can imagine Twips, which is the top brand in South Africa, has now been bought over in 2019 by BAT. So BAT essentially owns 98% of the market share of e-cigarettes. Just like in many other countries, that the tobacco industry has essentially moved to this emerging product. So basically, they're just a pig on, with a lipstick. It's the same industry. A recent publication has shown that these adverts are actually reaching young people. 1 in 4 South Africans, 16 to 19-year-old, had been exposed to e-cigarettes. However, the good news is that the majority of South Africans who believe that e-cigarettes and its promotion may make ex-smokers or even adolescents start smoking are in support of e-cigarette regulation. I think importantly also data from South Africa that show that the e-cigarette users often use other cessation aids. In the short term, are more likely to quit smoking, but in general, in the longer term, 12 months or longer, they are less likely to be successful quitting smoking. Importantly, that they are more likely to relapse. And this information is available as policy brief on the ATIM website for use to show and counter the industry's claim that the e-cigarettes is not a cessation aid, at least in our setting. This graph also demonstrates, like in Ghana, where 13 to 15-year-olds e-cigarettes is used, the e-cigarette prevalence is about 4.9%. We observed an increase in e-cigarette use for the age 16 to 35. In 2010, from under 1% moved to 4% in 2018. Importantly, the smoking prevalence did not decrease in the same age group. Actually, there seemed to be a trend for an increase. As you heard earlier on, regulation in the African region is very uncommon. Only 4 countries have prohibited the manufacture of e-cigarettes. Others have some form of adaptation of the existing laws. So in conclusion, more countries need to effectively regulate these emerging products. As the bans seem not to have been as effective because they still have market penetration in these jurisdictions. More studies are needed on what e-cigarette characteristics, because we know flavor can be a major problem in terms of attracting youth, but we need to provide evidence on some of this more in terms of that could support regulation and prevent youth uptake and reduce addictiveness, even if there's any evidence that it may have, or in future evidence that it may benefit individual smokers. In conclusion, prevention rather than harm reduction should remain the focus, especially in Africa, where the cigarette smoking epidemic has not matured, and there's evidence that the FCTC compliance laws are working. And therefore, we need not to be distracted by harm reduction. And I thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof, for that presentation and for keeping time. We have about maximum 10 minutes to wrap up and finish. I'm seeing a lot of comments and feedback in the chat, and I'm glad that the speakers have been working overtime to respond to them. So this is what we are going to do. I'm going to ask the speakers I'm just going to highlight some of the key comments that are coming into the chat and ask the speakers to give their closing remarks in response to those comments, as well as to one specific question that I'm going to ask for all of them. So the specific question is also came in through the Hoover platform. And one of the participants is asking, how can we, I think as actors, enhance collaborations? And I think collaborations here apply both nationally, regionally, and globally on the African continent in order to strengthen the base of knowledge and strategies as we move forward beyond this conference. So as we move away from this conference, and based on the presentations that you have made as speakers, what can we be able to do in terms of strengthening collaborations to ensure that the knowledge and information that we are sharing moves forward tobacco control in the continent? So I would want you to respond to that. And also, for some of the feedback that is coming from the chat is quite insightful. I think for the first presentation, someone said that cultural perspectives is one of the areas that is utilized to push tobacco use, which I think came out clearly in that presentation. And someone asked, what would you suggest? What would be your suggested strategies? I think this is for you, Catherine, for deculturalization, because we talked a lot about culture. So how do you suggest that we deculturalize, especially when we are talking about some of these harmful cultures that we have in the continent? And then for Dr. Ross, one of the participants talked about that the reality that the population of tobacco users in the continent is relatively small, which also came out in the presentation, and that we must not allow the tobacco industry to appear that the small group is more important than the larger population. And others, and then we also have to use effective policies such as taxation. So if there's any comment that you have seen in the chat that you may want to respond to in your closing remarks, please go ahead and do so. And then for Tonderai, there's a lot of feedback on your presentation. There's a request for you to share the link. And I think the majority of the participants are calling that such campaigns should be spread out across the continent, and others also feel that we should be targeting boys as well. And then for the presentation by Dr. Ranti, the use of the right terminology has been stressed so that we do not glamorize these dangerous products. And countries are also looking forward for their own countries to be able to effectively regulate these new and emerging products. And from the WHO, I would say that we are currently supporting a number of countries in Africa to be able to do just that. And then Prof talked about the novel products being a strategy to normalize tobacco use. And the strategies are being used, such as the use of celebrities and endorsements and targeting the youth through social media. And we also highlighted that the regulation in many countries in Africa is still weak. And I guess that goes back to the call for more countries to be able to strengthen their regulation. So if the speakers want to respond to any of these comments, please do so. And also, as you give your closing remarks, please try and address the question that I raised at the beginning. So let's start with Catherine, and each of us has about one minute because we do not have too much time. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Emma, and thanks for the questions. I've tried to respond to some of them on the comment. Concerning what we should do to foster networking in the African continent, I think that we should have conferences like this more regularly, And then we should also have a way of partnering with other researchers and advocates around the continent so that we can build consortiums of researchers and research so that we can do cross-country studies that will look at more than one African countries. And with that, we will get people working together. Concerning what we can do to deculturalize tobacco, I think that one of my papers on community participation in tobacco control may have an answer to that question. It's there on the site, I think on the web, the app for the person who asked the question to read. But two key points in that paper is that we should change products that have been used to, that have been mediatized, or, you know, so we can we can sensitize the traditional governance structure to use other products that are also culturally important. For example, the kola nut, we know the kola nut has caffeine, but you know there are other products, alligator pepper. In Africa, we have so many other products that we can use to replace some of these products that have been that are harmful, like the tobacco. And then, of course, sensitizing the traditional governance structure is important. Letting them know the harm of tobacco in the community in terms of both the health and the economics and all the other things that tobacco does to the society. If they are told, I'm sure that many of them will be willing to change these products. So my parting word would be deconstruct tobacco. That is just it. Denormalize it. You saw what Professor Lecomte presented, that the industry is wanting to normalize these products. So we should look at denormalizing it. And that has been shown to be successful in other parts of the world in preventing people.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt. 1 minute each for the other speakers. Let us start with Dr. Hannah in the order that we made our presentations.
Okay,
please.
good. Yeah, just quickly, I would like to address the issue of relatively low smoking prevalence in Africa and the implications for tobacco taxation. Because we have relatively low smoking prevalence, what it means that the potential to collect tax revenue on that small tax base is not good. And that means that in many countries, this is not on the radar on many ministries of finance to even think about tobacco taxes, because the revenue potential is just not there. I think what we need to do is to convince the ministries of finance and revenue authorities that it's not the revenue that is important in this case, it's the prevention, it's the public health gains, and it's the supporting of labor productivity and the future development that are the main issues. So it's the macro level perspective that we need to keep in mind that we talked about tobacco taxation in Africa. That's all from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Tonderai?
Thank you. In 1 minute, to answer the question posted on WOVA, is to place equal emphasis, as Dr. Hannah just said, on prevention. How do we prevent rather than wait for a problem to blow out of proportion, to burden public health systems and then tackle it? How do we do prevention in advance of the problem growing? And then the last part of my 1 minute is just to tackle the questions, the numerous questions around boys. Our program, the anecdotal evidence shows that the program is having an effect on boys. We've had classes that use our magazine, have structured it into their curriculum. And we've had anecdotal evidence, feedback from people saying that boys are consuming the content just as much as girls. But the important point is girls are impressionable and they're the most vulnerable, and the 13 to 15-year-old age group, they're smoking at a higher rate. And therefore, that is why our program is structured to tackle girls first. Thank you.
Thank you, Tonderai. Prof, you have the last minute.
Thank you. I think I'm just going to speak to the idea of how we should develop a network. Oftentimes, we've been talking to ourselves, our tobacco control community. I don't think we have done enough work in getting out the words into a grassroots movement. So we need to create a grassroots movement. First, of course, we need to be a network of advocates, But not just for, that cannot be the end. There is the means to creating this movement on the ground. Get into the communities, get ministry as well to work with other sectors, Ministry of Health, because they've also been doing tobacco control on their own. So we need to do something different in terms of tobacco control. Governance should be multi-sectoral. Advocates should go down to the grassroots and make this knowledge understood. And the media are best able to broker that knowledge between the scientists, advocates, and those in the communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. And that's a very good note to end our session. I want to thank the participants for their useful feedback. And more specifically, I want to thank the speakers for their insights and some of the things that they have brought to the table that we are going to think about even as we go beyond the conference. So I want to give the floor back to Yuveka, back to the organizers.